Welcome. My name is Nicholas Hale, and this is my confession. The night had that strange silence that comes before disaster. The kind of quiet that hums beneath your skin and tells you something's about to change. I was driving too fast down the coastal road, rain slashing across the windshield like 1,000 tiny knives. The city lights were shrinking behind me, the waves ahead roaring with a kind of hunger I almost understood. Atlas was in the back seat, his head resting on the armrest, eyes following every flicker of lightning. My only loyal companion left. The boardroom vultures could have my company, my name, my empire, but they were not taking him. I remember gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Freedom had a sound at night, the growl of the engine cutting through the storm. Then the headlights appeared. Blinding, sudden, wrong. A truck veered into my lane, too close, too fast. I tried to swerve, but the tires lost grip. The world spun into chaos, metal shrieked, glass shattered, and the sea rushed up like it had been waiting for me all along. I remember Atlas barking once, a desperate sound, before everything turned black. When I woke, I was upside down, half submerged in freezing water. The smell of gasoline and salt filled my lungs. My head throbbed, blood mixing with rain. I crawled out through the broken window, dragging myself toward the shore, heart hammering as if trying to tear its way out. Atlas. I called his name once, twice. A low whine answered from the darkness. I found him wedged between rocks, shivering, his paw bent at an unnatural angle. He tried to stand, loyal fool that he was. I wrapped him in my jacket and stumbled toward the road. No cars. No voices. Just the storm, relentless and merciless. I looked back once at the car half sinking in the surf, my past vanishing with it. Maybe that was justice. Maybe that was freedom. I couldn't go back. Not to the glass towers, not to the cameras waiting to devour another scandal. If the world believed I was dead, maybe it was time to let it. I tore off my watch, my wallet, everything that tied me to the man I had been. I walked into the dark, carrying the only creature who'd ever loved me without a reason. By dawn, I'd made it to the edge of the city, where the neon gave up and the streetlights flickered like dying fireflies. I laid Atlas beneath a flickering sign outside an abandoned laundromat. His breathing was shallow. My own legs were trembling. I needed help, but not the kind that came with headlines or pity. Rain kept falling, steady and cold. Somewhere between exhaustion and despair, I sank down beside him, whispering nonsense just to keep him awake. "We're fine," I lied. "We've made it through worse." My voice cracked. For the first time in years, there was no one to perform for. Just a broken man and his broken dog, lost in the ruins of their own making. That's when I saw her. A figure running through the rain, small, quick, holding a torn umbrella that the wind kept flipping inside out. She almost passed us, almost. Then she stopped, turned, and saw the dog struggling to lift his head. I expected her to scream or run, but she didn't. She dropped the umbrella, knelt in the mud, and whispered, "Hey, baby, hold on." Her hands trembled as she touched Atlas's fur. She looked up at me only once, eyes wide, wet with rain and something fiercer than fear, and said, "Help me." And just like that, the storm no longer felt like the end of something. It felt like the beginning. Her name was Nora. I learned that later, when my head had stopped ringing and my lungs no longer burned from the salt water. That night, all I knew was the sound of her voice cutting through the rain. She spoke softly to Atlas, not to me, as if the dog's pain mattered more than the strange man crouched beside him. "Easy, boy," she murmured, running her fingers through his soaked fur. Her hands were shaking, but steady enough to find the bleeding paw, the bruised ribs. The wind tore at her coat, plastering her hair to her face, yet she didn't flinch. Not when Atlas whimpered, not when lightning split the sky open above us. She looked up only once. "We need to get him inside. There's a vet clinic 2 blocks from here, but they close at 9. She checked her phone inside. "Of course. It's 10:30. I couldn't find my voice. My throat was raw, my thoughts heavy with the realization that I was standing in front of someone who didn't recognize me. Not the name, not the face that had filled business magazines for years. To her, I was just a man in the dark. That anonymity tasted strange, sharp, dangerous, liberating. "Can you walk?" she asked. When I nodded, she gestured toward a narrow alley between 2 shuttered stores. "There's a bakery down that way. My friend keeps the keys. We can warm him up there." I lifted Atlas carefully. He whined once, but didn't resist. Every step burned through my ribs. The world tilted with exhaustion, but I followed her through the puddles and the neon haze. The alley smelled of bread, rain, and rust. When she unlocked the side door, a wave of warmth hit us, yeast, sugar, and safety. Inside, the bakery looked like a place that had given up on mornings. Empty trays, dusted counters, and a single flickering light above the sink. She grabbed a stack of old towels and spread them on the floor. "Put him here." I knelt, setting Atlas down. He blinked up at me, tired but alive. I wanted to thank her, but the words jammed in my throat. She was already moving, boiling water, tearing fabric, muttering to herself about antiseptic she didn't have. She moved like someone who had been surviving on instinct for too long. "You're bleeding," she said suddenly, glancing at the gash on my forehead. "Sit down before you pass out." "I'm fine." She arched an eyebrow. "Sure. And I'm the Queen of France." For a moment, I almost smiled. It felt foreign on my face. She tore a strip from her sleeve, cleaned my wound with surprising gentleness, then looked at me properly for the first time. Her eyes were dark green, rimmed with fatigue but steady. "You're not from around here," she said. It wasn't a question. "No. Figured." She pressed the fabric to my temple. "You've got that look, like someone who lost everything and is pretending it was on purpose." That hit closer than she could imagine. I looked away. She didn't push. Instead, she knelt beside Atlas again, whispering to him until his breathing evened out. When the clock struck midnight, she sat back against the wall, exhausted. The rain outside softened to a whisper. "You can stay here for tonight," she said quietly. "The owner won't mind. He never comes around anymore." I nodded, unable to thank her properly. She didn't wait for gratitude anyway. She just closed her eyes, arms around her knees, her hair clinging to her face like a curtain between her and the world. I lay beside Atlas, listening to the slow rhythm of his breathing and hers, 2 fragile sounds in the dark. I had escaped death, ruin, and betrayal, but somehow, what scared me most was how safe I felt here, in a crumbling bakery beside a stranger who didn't know my name and didn't seem to care. Morning came slow, leaking through the cracked window like gold through dust. The storm had passed, leaving behind streets that glistened like they were trying to forget what they'd seen. I woke stiff, half frozen, my jacket balled beneath my head. Atlas was breathing steadily now, bandaged in mismatched cloth, one paw twitching in sleep. Nora was already up. She moved quietly, wiping the counters, her hair tied back in a loose knot. The smell of coffee filled the air, strong, cheap, perfect. She handed me a chip mug without a word, then crouched beside Atlas and scratched his ear. "He's a fighter," she said. "Guess that makes 2 of you." Her voice was rough from fatigue, but her smile was the kind that made the room feel less abandoned. I took a sip, wincing as the bitter warmth hit my throat. "Thank you," I managed. She shrugged. "Don't thank me. Thank him." She nodded at the dog. If he hadn't been out there, I'd have kept walking. I don't usually play hero in the rain. I watched her for a while, the way she tucked her sleeves into her palms, the faint bruise on her wrist, the way she avoided eye contact for too long. She'd been through things. You could always tell by how gently someone handled brokenness. "What's his name?" she asked. "Atlas." "Figures. Big name for a big heart." She smiled, then sighed. "I should get going. I've got a shift at the cafe, if my boss hasn't replaced me already." I hesitated. "If you need help fixing this place up, I can work." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You mean you're not heading home?" Home. The word hit like a stone. I forced a small smile. "Nowhere to be." She studied me a moment longer, like she could hear the lie buried beneath the calm. "I've got a spare room upstairs," she said finally. "It's small, but dry. Rent's cheap if you can handle some repairs. The ceiling leaks, the pipes complain, and the landlord's a ghost." "Sounds better than most of my options." She nodded, already turning away, as if she decided and didn't want to discuss it. "Then it's settled. You'll fix things. I'll feed you. Deal?" "Deal." That's how I became Alex, the name I gave her without thinking. It slipped out too easily, like I'd been waiting to be someone else. The room above the bakery was exactly what she'd promised. Small, uneven floors, walls painted the color of surrender. But it had a window that caught the evening light just right, spilling warmth across the bed. Atlas claimed the foot of it instantly, his tail thumping weakly against the boards. Days passed in a rhythm that didn't feel real. I fixed the dripping sink, patched the cracks in the wall, rewired an outlet that sparked like it had opinions. Nora worked late, sometimes coming home smelling of burnt coffee and rain. She always brought leftovers, soup in dented containers, half a baguette wrapped in napkins, and set them on my table without a word. We talked in pieces. She told me about her mother, a nurse who used to hum old songs while folding laundry. About the bakery's owner, who vanished 2 years ago and never looked back. I told her small truths. Grew up near the coast, worked in management, had a thing for dogs. She never pressed for more. Some nights she'd sit on the floor beside Atlas, her fingers tracing lazy circles on his fur, while I pretended to read. I'd catch her humming softly, the same tune every time. It felt like memory, not melody. It had been years since I'd known quiet like that. No phones, no assistants, no cameras flashing like gunfire. Just the steady hum of an old fridge, a dog's sigh, and a woman who saw no value in asking for more than I could give. I should have felt guilty for lying to her. Instead, I felt alive for the first time since the crash. By the 3rd week, the rhythm of the bakery had become my heartbeat. Mornings began with the groan of old pipes and the scent of yeast drifting through the cracks in the floor. I'd climb down before sunrise, fix whatever had decided to break overnight, and watch Nora prepare for the day like someone waging war against exhaustion. She moved quickly, hair tied, sleeves rolled, hands white with flour. She wasn't graceful, but she was relentless. When she caught me watching, she'd smirk and say, "Don't just stand there, Alex. The universe isn't going to fix my oven for free." I liked the way she said my name. It sounded real in her mouth, like it belonged to a man who hadn't lost everything. I played the part easily, almost too easily. Every lie I told was simple, half-truths about small towns, odd jobs, the kind of work that didn't leave traces. The kind of man nobody looked for. At night, after she locked the doors and counted the day's meager earnings, we'd sit on the bakery floor with mugs of instant cocoa, Atlas curled between us. She'd tell me about the customers, old women who gossiped over cinnamon rolls, teenagers sneaking cigarettes in the alley, delivery men who flirted because it made the day shorter. Her stories were ordinary, and maybe that's why they saved me. I hadn't realized how starved I was for ordinary. Still, the silence between us grew heavier. She must have felt it too, the questions I didn't answer, the shadows that followed me even in sunlight. Once, she caught me staring at a newspaper left on the counter. My name was printed there, bold and final. Billionaire presumed dead after crash. "Bad news?" she asked. I folded the paper before she could see. "Old news." She didn't press, but her eyes lingered a little longer that night. The light tasted bitter after that. I'd built an empire by reading people, but Nora was unreadable. Her calm wasn't emptiness, it was armor. Whatever life had taken from her, she'd rebuilt in smaller, quieter ways. Every bruise she carried had been turned into strength. One evening, while thunder rolled outside, she asked, "What were you before all this? Does it matter?" "Only if you think it does." She smiled faintly, not expecting an answer. "People don't end up sleeping above bakeries by accident. Some are running from something, some toward it. And you?" "I'm just trying to stay in one piece." There it was, our truce. Two fugitives from different worlds pretending the present was enough. When she went to bed, I stayed downstairs, sitting in the dim glow of the streetlight bleeding through the glass. I watched rain streak across the window and thought about the men who'd forced me off the road, about the company I'd built and the vultures now circling it. Revenge still burned in the corners of my mind, but every time I looked upstairs and heard Nora's faint snore, the fire dulled. I told myself it was temporary, a pause before reclaiming my life. Yet with every passing day, the quiet began to feel like home. And that frightened me more than any storm ever had. It started with a name whispered on a radio left playing in the bakery. A morning host's voice, light and careless, asterisk. In other news, authorities continue to search for billionaire Nicholas Hale, missing for over a month after his car was found wrecked off the northern coast. Foul play is now suspected, asterisk. My hands froze over the dough. The sound of my own name spoken like a rumor made the room tilt. Nora didn't look up. She was humming to herself, sweeping flour into neat circles. I reached over, twisted the dial, and cut the voice off mid-sentence. That silence was heavier than thunder. All day, I felt her eyes flicker toward me when she thought I wasn't looking. She wasn't stupid. She'd seen the scar on my temple, the calluses that didn't belong to a drifter's hands, the way I flinched at the sound of cameras clicking and passing cars. I could almost hear her piecing it together, the gaps in my stories, the inconsistencies, the quiet panic that sometimes broke through my calm. That night, she didn't come down for dinner. The light under her door stayed on long after midnight. When I finally slept, the dream came back, headlights, glass, the flash of a gunmetal hood cutting across my lane. I woke drenched in sweat, heart hammering like it still remembered the crash. Atlas stirred beside me, whining softly. I reached to calm him, and froze. Through the crack beneath my door, I saw a slice of light. A shadow moved past it. Then the soft creak of the front steps. Nora. I found her downstairs, sitting at the counter, her phone glowing blue against her pale face. On the screen was my picture, one of those sterile corporate portraits, tailored suit, empty smile. Below it, the headline screamed asterisk Nicholas Hale missing, presumed dead. Asterisk. She didn't speak when she saw me. Just locked her eyes on mine and waited. I opened my mouth, but the truth had too many edges to hold. "It's not what it looks like," I said, hating how thin the words sounded. "So what is it?" Her voice was soft but sharp, every syllable trembling with something more than anger. "Who are you, really?" The question I'd been running from finally caught up. "Nicholas," I said quietly. "I used to own half of the skyline you see from here. I lost control of my company, and someone tried to make sure I wouldn't come back to reclaim it. She let out a breath that sounded like disbelief and heartbreak knotted together. You let me believe you were homeless. You let me. She stopped herself, shaking her head. I fed you, trusted you, told you things I don't tell anyone. And you lied every single day. Nora, I didn't plan this. I didn't even plan to survive. Then why stay? I didn't have an answer that wouldn't hurt her. Because you made me forget I was someone else. Because this broken place was the first peace I'd known in years. Her shoulders tensed, her voice cracking. You watched me worry about rent while you... What? Hid your billions in guilt? The truth hit harder than her words. I wanted to explain that money hadn't saved me, that it had nearly destroyed everything human in me, but her silence said she wouldn't hear it now. She turned away, grabbing her coat. You should go, Nicholas. Whoever you were before, you don't belong here. I stood there, every instinct screaming to fight, to make her understand, but the look in her eyes made me stop. It wasn't fury. It was something colder, disappointment. When the door closed behind her, the bakery felt hollow, stripped of air. Atlas limped to the window, whining softly at the empty street. Yeah, I whispered, sinking onto the floor beside him. I messed it up, boy. Outside, the city lights blinked like distant cameras searching. And for the first time since the crash, I almost wished they'd find me. 2 days passed before I saw her again. The bakery stayed silent, the smell of flour replaced by dust and regret. I lived in that quiet like a punishment, listening to Atlas whimper by the door every time footsteps echoed outside. Then, one morning, he collapsed. No bark, no warning, just a soft cry and a fall that made my heart stop. I lifted him, felt the heat of fever under his fur, and didn't think twice. The vet's office was 3 blocks away. I carried him through the dawn, hood pulled low, the city waking around me. When I pushed open the glass door, the receptionist froze. Her eyes darted from the bloodied bandage on my arm to the engraved tag on Atlas's collar. She whispered my name like a confession. Nicholas Hale. By the time I left the clinic, I knew it was over. The vet had recognized me, the news would spread, and the ghost I had been was about to vanish. But all I could think about was Nora, how she'd looked at me that night, like I'd broken something sacred. When I returned, she was there. Standing outside the bakery, with the morning paper clutched in her hand. My face was printed across it, * billionaire found alive. * the words felt like a sentence. You didn't even bother to hide it this time, she said. I wasn't trying to anymore. Her eyes were red, tired. You lied to me, Nicholas. Every word you said was a lie. Not every word. I stepped closer. Everything I did here, working, fixing things, staying, it was real. You were real. She looked away, but I caught the tremor in her breath. You could have told me. I wanted to. I said softly. Every night I almost did. But I was terrified that the moment you knew who I was, you'd stop seeing me. She met my gaze then, anger and longing tangled together. You think I cared about your money? I think you cared about the man I was pretending to be. And maybe that's the only version of me worth anything. The distance between us disappeared without thought. One moment she was glaring at me, the next I was close enough to feel the warmth of her breath, the ache of everything we hadn't said. Don't, she whispered. But her hand didn't move when I brushed a strand of wet hair from her cheek. I can't, I murmured. Not after you. She closed her eyes, like surrendering hurt more than fighting. When her lips met mine, it wasn't soft. It was a collision, all the anger and longing and disbelief we'd been holding back. It tasted of salt and forgiveness, of something that might never survive daylight. When we finally pulled apart, her voice was a whisper. You still have to go back to your world, don't you? I do, I said. But I'll come back if you'll let me. She shook her head, half smiling, half crying. You belong to another life, Nicholas. One that eats people like me alive. Maybe I'm done being eaten. I took her hand, pressed it to my chest. This is the only place I've felt alive since that crash. Atlas barked weakly from inside, the sound breaking whatever spell we'd been caught in. She exhaled shakily, stepping back, her fingers slipping from mine. Take care of him, she said. He deserves the truth. So do you. I watched her walk away again, her figure fading into the early light. The world had found me, but the only thing that mattered was slipping through my hands. For the first time in years, I didn't care about headlines or boardrooms. All I cared about was a woman who'd saved my dog, and, without realizing it, saved me too. Weeks passed before she agreed to see me again. By then, the world had reclaimed me. Reporters camped outside my gates, investors sent champagne, lawyers argued about the empire I'd left bleeding. Everyone wanted a statement, a strategy, a resurrection. No one asked if I wanted to come back at all. At night, when the mansion was quiet and polished back into perfection, I found myself staring at the space beside my bed, where a dog once slept and a woman once smiled without calculation. When Atlas recovered, I knew where I needed to go. I didn't send guards or cars this time. I walked, in plain clothes, under the same rain that had once hidden us. The bakery looked smaller than I remembered, the sign half faded, the window light warm against the cold evening. She was inside, arranging bread like it mattered. She looked up when I entered. Her face changed, but not with surprise. More like exhaustion. You shouldn't be here, she said. I shouldn't have left. Nora wiped her hands on her apron, arms folding across her chest like armor. What do you want, Nicholas? The truth, I said quietly. And maybe a second chance to earn it. She laughed once, brittle. You already have everything. Why come back to this? Because everything means nothing without you. She froze. For a second, neither of us breathed. I stepped closer, the smell of flour and sugar wrapping around us. You think I stayed here because I needed shelter? I stayed because you made me remember what it felt like to be human. You gave me peace. You gave me a reason to come back. Her eyes softened, but her voice stayed wary. And what happens when the world remembers you again? When they drag you back into their headlines? Then I'll tell them this. I moved closer, until her breath trembled against my throat. That I lost everything, and the only thing worth finding was you. Her fingers twitched, like she wanted to push me away and couldn't. You make it sound easy. It isn't, I whispered. But nothing real ever is. For a long heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then she reached up, fingertips brushing the scar above my brow, the mark she'd cleaned that first night. I hated you, she murmured. For lying, for making me care. And now? Her lips curved, barely there. Now I hate that I still do. When I kissed her, it wasn't gentle. It was desperate, like two people clinging to the edge of something too fragile to name. Her hands fisted in my shirt. Mine slid into her hair, tasting rain and memory and everything I'd missed. The world outside could have burned and I wouldn't have noticed. When we finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine, breath shaky. You have no idea what you're asking for, she said. I'm asking for a chance, I murmured. To build something that isn't made of glass and fear. Atlas barked softly near the counter, as if approving. She laughed, low, broken, beautiful. You and that dog, she whispered. Always showing up when I've just learned how to breathe again. I took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Then maybe I'm here to remind you to keep breathing. Her eyes glistened. Don't make promises you can't keep. Then I'll keep it, I said simply. All of it. For the first time since the crash, I felt like I was standing on solid ground, not because I'd rebuilt my empire, but because she was standing there with me, her hand trembling against my chest, her heart beating the same uneven rhythm as mine. Whatever came next, it began there, in the dim light of a forgotten bakery, between the smell of bread and rain, where forgiveness finally tasted like love. A year later, the world called it a comeback. The media loved their Phoenix stories. Man survives crash, rebuilds empire, stares down betrayal, emerges stronger. They printed my face on magazine covers again, airbrushed and smiling, as if survival was a marketing strategy. But none of that felt like victory. The real story never made the headlines. The real story lived above a bakery that smelled of sugar and forgiveness. The first months were chaos. I fired half my board, exposed the men who had tried to erase me, and handed the rest of the company to people who actually believed in it. I watched them shake my hand with polished smiles and empty eyes, and for once I didn't care. Because at night, when the world turned quiet, I drove across the bridge, parked outside a familiar storefront, and breathed again. She'd reopened the bakery properly now. Asterisk Atlas and Company asterisk in soft gold letters above the door. I'd protested the name. She'd ignored me. "He's the real hero," she said. "You just got lucky." I came by before dawn most mornings, before customers, before the world remembered who I was. I'd help her roll dough, pretending I knew what I was doing. She'd laugh, call me hopeless, and wipe flour across my cheek like a brand. I'd steal a kiss in return, her lips tasting faintly of vanilla and defiance. Sometimes she'd pull away, shaking her head. "You don't belong in this small life, Nicholas." And I'd tell her, "Then I'll make mine smaller." But she was right. There were still two worlds between us, the glittering one that demanded my name, and this quiet one that asked for nothing but truth. So I learned to live between them. Days spent signing contracts, nights spent learning the art of ordinary love. On the anniversary of the crash, I took her back to the coast. The sea was calmer now, the sky a soft bruised gray. Atlas limped along the sand, tail wagging, as if he still remembered where it all began. We sat by the rocks where I'd almost died. She leaned her head against my shoulder, her hand slipping into mine. "Strange place for a date," she murmured. "It's where you found him," I said. "And where you saved me." She smiled faintly. "I didn't save you. You just decided to live again. Because you showed me how." The wind caught her hair, brushing it across my face. I kissed her then, slow, deep, the kind of kiss that doesn't ask for anything except forever. The ocean roared behind us, the same sound that once felt like an ending. Now it sounded like a promise. When we finally pulled apart, she whispered, "What happens next?" I smiled, tracing her jaw with my thumb. "Next, we live. No secrets. No lies. Just mornings that smell like coffee and nights that smell like rain." She laughed quietly. "That's almost poetic." "Almost? Don't get smug, Mr. Hale." Atlas barked then, impatient, chasing the tide. She stood, pulling me up with her. The horizon was opening, gold spilling across the water. For the first time, I didn't think about boardrooms or power or legacy. Just her hand in mine, warm and sure. As the sun climbed, I turned to her. "You know, that night I thought the storm was punishment. And now I think it was the only way for the world to wash me back to you." She leaned in, her voice a whisper against my skin. "Then don't ever get lost again." "I won't," I said, meaning it. We walked along the shore, leaving two sets of footprints and one small paw trail between them, the tide chasing but never catching us. For once, there was no running, no pretending, just light, returning to everything that had once drowned in the dark. Tell me in the comments what this story made you feel. Did it pull you in? break your heart a little, or leave you wondering how far a person can go for a second chance? And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Rumor has it that everyone who does gets a little luck sent their way today. Maybe a message. Maybe a smile. Or maybe that quiet miracle that's already heading toward you.